advice about our, banana plantations, how we might harness these materials more. We heard about astrophysics, our stargazing, tradition here, and how we can make the most of that as well in the future. Jenny was talking about how we saw cities that were able to build community and improve the health of the inhabitants by applying organic agriculture, giving more guidelines about how to have a healthy diet. There was an impact on the health of citizens and the industry, or I guess the sector of agriculture. So I think you can hear the English now. Are you hearing the translation? Great. I was just giving a summary of some of the things that you mentioned in your presentations. Some of our audience weren't able to hear the translation. They hadn't clicked on the QR link to be able to access the interpretation, but everyone is connected now. We have a few minutes for this first panel. We are running a little behind, but my first question is for Jenny. What do you think are the main things that we should be doing, our leaders, our urban leaders should be doing, political leaders or otherwise, to ensure a regenerative future for our city?
Okay, big question, huge question. I think every huge change in human systems over time has started with learning. So I think that one of the most important things that municipalities or business organizations can do is to start to incorporate in their annual budget fields of learning about the future, and investing in building new capabilities for a future that will be very much different from the one that we are sitting in now. The human nature tends to respond to crisis when the proverbial hits the fan. But I think we are at a time when all organizations, and that includes municipalities, and municipalities by their nature are the kind of organizations that have the responsibility for keeping the plane in the air. They fill the potholes, they do social care. But I think as organizations, they also have to transform their role to enable their employees and also citizens to become systems change organizations and people. So that's a fundamental change in how municipalities might work in the future. In the UK, in Wales, part of the UK, we have now had for 10 years a law called the Wellbeing of Future Generations Act that compels all municipalities to consider the well-being of future generations in all their procurement, all their strategy, and all their future decision-making. And I think that has proven over 10 years, it's not perfect, but a really important intervention that is changing the nature of the relationship between municipalities, place, and people. So that's one thing. To do with the question. As Melissa was talking, I suddenly realized that we had met 30 years ago. 30 years ago, I ran a brand agency in London called Anderson Whitehall, and Hussein Chalayan was one of our clients. And Melissa came into our office and presented the work that she was doing at the time in her master's program, which is amazing. So 30 years later, we have to thank Santa Cruz for bringing us back together again. And I bet you don't remember that. But that will be an interesting discussion at the end of today.
Yes, 30 years later in a wonderful city. Well, we're really delighted to be able to bring you back together and hear everything you have to tell us. Um, we've received a question through this QR code that I'd like to ask now from Jorge. He said it's very interesting, this concept of city design, where we should respect the natural designs that are present on the island. But I think one of the biggest problems we have is high population density and high demand for housing. This makes it difficult to optimize the terrain. Can you think of an alternative?
Look, again, there are many, many plants that have actually colonized mountains, and I would look to some of their systems. Plants have essentially colonized more or less everywhere on Earth. It's only in Antarctica where we find that the terrain is largely too harsh for some kinds of plants. So I would look to the hardiest plants that you have on the island. What are their strategies? Because your geology here on the island is very specific. So there would be no point in looking to a plant from some other place in the world. It would have to be something that was of this place, maybe a selection of them. And then, look at essentially the process that I've taken my work through is I find some interesting specimens. I find specimens that have coexisted in a place a long time. And then you go through the process of understanding how they work and then looking at how you can apply that to our systems. And you can do that in ways that are very complex or simple. So sometimes it might just be something like an aspect of the engineering of the building foundations that might make a particular terrain more habitable. But also I would think about, the way that people live is changing. And this is, again, it's testament to human evolution and innovation. Our relationship with buildings, with homes, doesn't stay constant. We were principally a nomadic species, and then we settled with the agricultural revolution. And if you look to the younger generation today, you will notice an enormous shift. Many of them are not buying properties, because it's not just here, but in many parts of the world, particularly in the United Kingdom and the United States, young people cannot get on the property ladder. They cannot afford to buy property. So how have they responded? Well, number one, they made their own real estate, which is called the internet. So this is why many young people today, they don't need property, they are remote. But the growth in things like recreational vehicles, airstreams, caravans, van life, massive. Many young people, and this is also because their relationship with material things has changed. They're more likely to rent things. They're more likely, we had physical things. We bought books, we bought vinyls, we bought lots of equipment. Younger people exist in a world where they have many fewer physical things and they don't need the space. So I would actually tackle your architectural, your housing shortage by reinventing the concept of housing. And of course, when you build, don't build for yourself, you're building for the younger generation. So bring them right to the heart of your conversation.
I think if I can just add to that, Melissa, I think there are different phases to how we can act on the systems that we have in existence. We can work in the current space where we're mitigating existing systems that we have and trying to tweak them and change them. We can innovate, disruptively innovate what is in existence, and then we can also look at the future. But I think in terms of housing, because housing is a challenge and population is a challenge, density is a challenge in many places, that also includes thinking, because as Melissa said, young people are living differently, but thinking about the governance and design and finance of how we build. So Denmark is one of the countries that's very advanced in co-living housing systems. And those are starting to be experimented with in small parts of the UK. But it's also the mindset. I'm of an age where I grew up, and the thing that we aspired to as a family was to be the first family in our wider family existence that owned a house. But that was because we were enculturated to believe that owning a house was important. Owning a house was part of cultural status, but it was also part of your financial security for the future. And these are systems that we have to rethink and change thinking around our relationship to house ownership. And experiment in different places with the governance, ownership, and also use of what is in existence. So in the States, for example, there are a lot of experiments for nomadic younger populations to utilize university buildings in university term downtime, but to bring communities together to work for 3 or 4 months, or sometimes 3 or 4 years, on place-based innovation, but to give homes and habitation during that period where people with vastly different areas of expertise can come together and work with local populations on local challenges. So it is about really rethinking what we have in existence, inventing new forms, but also looking at governance and finance too, which hugely affect how we think about the need to own homes individually in the first place, I think.
Well, I'm sure that all of these ideas will soon be at the center of how we think and how we work. So, how can this regenerative economy attract private investment?
I think it's a challenge when we look at how existing finance flows. But finance is starting to flow differently, and what is making private investors and global investors think differently about the future is their relationship to risk. Investment organizations are very focused on risk prediction and risk management, and they can see, just as we can see, that the existing economic and cultural systems that we have are starting to fail and starting not to work. But there are small experiments in different places of the world looking at how you bring private finance into regenerative futures. And I spoke about one of them, which is the bioregional financing facility. So how do you bring existing investment capital, individual existing wealth, institutional finance together in blended finance programs? WWF Wholescape project, that's an example of trying to bring existing and innovative financial models into a region to help transform industrial agriculture. But it's very experimental at this stage. But it is what we are seeing in the intergenerational wealth transfer that is going on around the world as the younger generation are inheriting in private family funds vast amounts of wealth, that wealth is either being transferred out into purpose-led projects around the world or being put into service of the future at zero or very, very low rate returns. And I have huge faith in the intergenerational transfer that is moving into those young people. We're seeing it really strongly in South America. It's starting to emerge in the US, but I think family offices, because they have control of that wealth, can play a really strong role in a transformative future.
I'll just add to that. My lens on this has been rather different because my personal experience of funding has been not unlike that of my heroes like von Humboldt and Da Vinci. I have received not a single euro of funding for my more than 20 years of research. So everything I've worked on, and I've not just set that up, I've set awards programs, international awards programs, publications, and many businesses up with a budget of nothing. And the key ways that I've done that is, number one, through collaborations. having the right people, the right minds in the room. And actually, if you look at the costs of early phase innovation, it's getting that, it's getting the people, the minds, that is one of your biggest costs. So working out, you have to have mutually beneficial relationships. And there are a lot of people out there that feel that for whatever reason, they cannot get their projects off the ground. So understand who is out there, what have they got to bring to the table, what can you give them? It has to be an equitable relationship, it has to be fair, and then also building it, but staying modest. One of the reasons that I've been able to do what I've done is I've always been the scientist. I've done the R&D step by step by step. I build my proof of concept. I build the business model. And then what I do, and this is my background, started in fashion design. Then you create the brand. Then you create the buzz. Then you actually get something that gets the attention of people with money. You know, now there are different routes. I've never gone the sort of the longer, I find that some routes take a long time. I go through the fast routes because I like fast innovation. But I think the build it, show it, test it. And the other thing is, why have we failed so catastrophically? And I'm going to use the UK as an example. I have actually moved from the UK. I spent, most of my career working there. But I found that within the United Kingdom, it became incredibly bureaucratic. It became a situation where the same old suspects get the same old funding, and some of them, frankly, charge far too much. Some of the consultancies, some of the biggest consultancies. And I didn't want to be a part of that. And in the United Kingdom, there's no shortage of research funding. But if you don't put the funding in the right place and in the right way, it's like burning money. So I think test it, try it, and also be open. Now, one of the reasons actually that this particular project appealed to me, because I'm a woman that walks her talk, I've had a number of petroleum companies come to me this past 20 years and offer me large amounts of money to be a presenter or a figurehead or something for their company, and I've turned them down because I do not want to be seen as not walking my talk. But I have worked with those that are in the industry. Why? Because they're some of the best scientists on the planet. Some of the best geologists work in the petroleum industry. Some of the most, expert individuals in terms of understanding the Earth systems. That's the industry they're in. So you can actually find ways to work together, even if, we are living in the age of greenwash. We are living in the age when you've got to be able to walk your talk, or the media can just descend on you, and then, that can be disruptive. But I think test it, experiment, accept there's going to be failure, accept there are going to be things that don't go well, but actually some of the things that go badly, and it is a cliche, they are the catalyst to something that works brilliantly well. But above all, just get a foot on the ladder. Don't wait around, because this is all moving quickly. So at least start.
And I think to add to that, Melissa, the example of Sheffield, I think, is really interesting. And it is the relationships that really count. But it's looking for the people on the edges and at the margins of innovation and experimentation, looking for others who may not be working necessarily in your field, but who can you form adjacent partnerships with, who probably, as Melissa just said, will have zero funding like you, but through collaboration together, you can create a networked field that will attract attention and investment. So, and it's always, change happens at the edges of systems everywhere. And it was very interesting, just as I was coming here, I ran a little AI experiment. And LLMs cannot see the edge of innovation. They cannot track it because it hasn't yet been documented and published as an academic paper. So the innovation of cities that is happening around the edges is invisible to those systems, but that does not mean it does not exist. So it's actually going out and looking for those small groups of innovators in whatever field they are that are like you, trying to find a different way into the future and working out how you can collaborate together to create a more networked field. And a networked field is always stronger than a single individual innovator.
Muy bien. Very well. Okay, so far so forth during this round table, during this morning. Thank you very much for your participation during this 360 session. So we would like to say goodbye with a warm applause, and let's go and grab a cup of coffee. We well deserve it. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Jenny Anderson and Melissa Ferry. And we will just retake in about a half an hour. We will see you